And thank you for joining and being willing to come on today.
My pleasure, Ken. I love it when people ask questions, lots of deep questions, because lots of lots of questions need to be answered because there's a lot of deception going on, and the people of Earth need to know the full truth.
Agreed. Agreed. And this all started with in 1969 for you, from what I understand.
Yeah, I had a high level top secret security clearance in naval communications. I worked at the Naval Communications Station in San Francisco, um, and handled lots of top secret messages. In 1969, I received from a ship off the coast of Alaska that was reporting the crew visually witnessed a brightly glowing reddish orange elliptical object, a flying saucer basically, emerging off port bow of the ship and then shooting straight up into space, going over 7,000 miles per hour. This was a secret classified priority level going to the chief of naval operations. And so, this this kind of left a seed in my head about, this is the Navy knows these. I mean, decades later, I find out that the Navy and the Soviet naval intelligence, more than half of the UFOs, UAPs, whatever you want to call them, going in and out of our planet are coming out of our oceans. And, as in recent times, in the last few years, more and more reports of the Navy seeing these objects coming out of our oceans and becoming more mainstream now. But this was way back in 1969 when we were, going to the moon.
1969, there you have it. And how did, if I may, how did you get involved with the 2001 press club meeting? How did all of that begin for you?
I for over the years I've been researching. Even 1993 I met with a group of researchers outside Area 51 with Robert Lazar, who was giving his first public testimony of reverse engineering the extraterrestrial craft over at S4. And over the years I've researched, and I really wasn't into going to the UFO conferences. And in 2000, a girlfriend wanted to go there, and I really wasn't that interested in it because it was kind of like kind of like a zoo, all the stuff. And
Yeah.
so we kind of crashed the cocktail party, and I heard what Dr. Greer was going to be doing, going to Washington. I thought, wow, somebody has finally the courage to actually get these witnesses to go before the mainstream media of the world, go to Washington. And I just, wow, somebody's finally doing something. And so I was had a glass of wine and holding an hors d'oeuvre plate, and Dr. Greer happened to come over and said, "Oh, can I try one of those?" And I said, "Sure," And I said, "Oh, by the way, when I was in the Navy, I had a high level top secret clearance and received message of extraterrestrial. Oh, here, go over and see Linda, and we'll have to videotape you." So I was the 100th videotaped witness. And then what happened was, one of the witnesses, and I find out decades later that it was, God, what was his name? Um, got a total blank. Anyway, somebody, they had to pull them, and they needed somebody to substitute, and so I volunteered. I said, "Yeah, I'll take care of it. I'll pay my own way." I just felt like it was so important what was going on. I wanted to support it any way I could, and so David Adair, Yeah, that was
I
the
was that was the name I was thinking. Wow, David,
yeah.
yes,
For
because
some reason, I got a
he had
blank
said
on
he had
that.
gotten pulled. He said he had gotten pulled. I couldn't remember his first name, but yeah,
And I
so
was his replacement, apparently, you know. And so, all of us gave testimony. Myself being an ex-ABC newsman, I was a broadcast engineer for many years. I looked at the place was packed with 22 cameras in the back row, largest event in the history of Press Club, other than the Lewinsky thing with Clinton. Um, and I couldn't imagine, the testimonies being given, that we have bases on the other side of the moon, nukes being shut down, 57 different species already categorized. We've had faster than light craft developed back in the 1950s. We have 0 point energy. We don't need nuclear, oil, and coal. Presidents, CIA directors, heads of intelligence are all being illegally denied access. In fact, that's what brought about the meeting, was because of interesting connections. The meeting that I had with Robert Lazar and the other researchers actually evoked a response from the base at Area 51, that they sent out a NRO classified advisory that, to avoid this group at all costs, and the disciplinary actions. And, if anybody contacts this group, they want to make sure that any of the base personnel were, fully isolated from this group meeting that was happening just outside the base. And so on this list, they had a distribution list of unacknowledged special access programs, such as Cosmic Ops, Magi Ops, and like that. So somehow Dr. Greer was able to acquire this document. And so he went in 1997, along with astronaut Edgar Mitchell and Commander Will Miller, to meet with the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Vice Admiral Thomas Wilson. He looked into it, found out that the corporations were doing reverse engineering, and that he was denied access. And him, in his constitutional authority, should have had legal access to these projects, if anybody. And he told Dr. Greer, he said, if you can get your people willing to, each one of us that there was 20 of us, and there was 500 behind us that weren't visible, that each one of us stated we're willing to testify under oath before all the cameras. If you have your people willing to talk on record, testify under oath, you have my permission to go to the mainstream media with this. This group is illegal. And so that's what greenlighted the 2001 National Press Club event. Now, what happened was all these explosive testimonies, any of them would have gathered the public's attention. But the media very carefully sanitized it using psychological methods of what's called a limited hangout. In other words, they made it sound like they wanted to have a congressional hearing on simply the reality of UFOs, right? And so all this implying that we have an illegal infiltration into our government is completely whitewashed. And so the public never got that message. It went viral on the internet, inspired, like Dr. Michael Salla got fired from the university because of his interest in it. And
Michael Salla did.
yeah, Dr. Michael Salla, he was a teaching professor at a major university, and because he was inspired by his witnesses, feeling like, these are credible people. These people are willing to testify under oath, and their testimonies collaborate with each other. And so he started researching, and the education system kind of frowns on this subject for him to go into, and they fired him, and now he devotes full time. He does incredible research. It also inspired a hacker in the UK, Gary McKinnon, who found out that, and they wanted to put him away for 70 years in prison because he went into the Naval Space Command computers and found out that there was the Navy's secret space program called Solar Warden with non-terrestrial officers and these huge, giant kilometers long space cruisers that they had that was launched back in the 1980s. So we've had, incredibly advanced technology. So yeah, the mainstream media. The mainstream media is indeed the enemy of the people. That's what I can say. They have been working not for the interest of the American people or the people of the world, but toward toward a hidden agenda. And as I researched back, a media company out of the Hollywood wanted me to write an article, being a ABC newsman and a witness, on the media control in regards to the UFO issue. Obviously, there's been media control for many decades, and then all of a sudden, certain things come out, certain things get green lighted, certain things get suppressed, and so I wanted to try to understand, being involved in this particular event, how that happened. And as you research back through history, you find out that we, as Dr. Greer testified at the citizen hearing in 2013, that by October of 1954, we had achieved anti-gravity. 20 years before that, 1934, Nazi Germany achieved anti-gravity. And this is how they were able to intimidate the Truman and Eisenhower administrations, infiltrate into the United States, basically
Through
create a
paperclip?
paperclip, and going to the high levels in the pharmaceutical corporations. They took and rewrote the history of what happened in World War II and in 1946 through the Rockefeller Foundation to hide the Nazi escape and infiltration. Operation Mockingbird, CIA started with 400 journalists that the CIA was giving them information to create the perception. Project Dove out of Hollywood, the movie industry. The pharmaceutical corporations, they basically infiltrated in, and the plan was called Weltanschauungskrieg, which translates from German to mean worldview warfare. They what they were able to do with their advanced technology, they were able to intimidate the Truman and Eisenhower administration. They flew over the Capitol building with a Nazi craft back in July of 1952.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. So that wasn't
Nazi craft that came out of Antarctica.
That wasn't anything ET then.
Right.
I've never heard this before. Okay, but I'm familiar with the 1952 incident. I thought it was possibly related to the ET that we had in captivity that had passed away. That's what I was thinking, but your perspective is you're saying those were terrestrial, something we created.
Based on witness testimonies. And you have to think about, James Ford. It was a single Navy spy back in 1937, I believe, that came and jumped chain of command, went directly to the Secretary of the Navy, James Forrestal, and revealed that the Nazi SS had their own secret space program with anti-gravity craft being developed. And so James Forrestal started a Navy spy program embedded into the Nazi SS, and they were trying to catch up with what they were doing. And what Forrestal did was he sent Admiral Byrd down to attack the Nazi base down in Antarctica. You're familiar with Operation High Jump.
I am. That was 1947. Correct me if I'm wrong. The same year that
1946, 47. And they came out of the oceans with their anti-gravity craft. By this time, they had developed it enough with directed energy weapons. They wiped out all their aircraft. I mean, they had a huge military armada they sent down there. They, was sworn to secrecy. And so with this intimidation, by 1955, making a long story short, which is a long story with a lot of details, basically they negotiated an agreement surrender with President Eisenhower. And so ever since that time, ever since Eisenhower was denied access, he tried to look into Area 51 and they denied him access. He threatened to go in with the First Army and tear this thing apart until they allowed two CIA individuals to see that there was extraterrestrials there and there were reverse engineering craft. He tried to convey a lot of this to Kennedy, who had a lot of knowledge in this with his background, Office of Naval Intelligence, and he was already read into it by the Secretary of the Air Force. So Eisenhower was denied access. Kennedy, 10 days after he put in a request to the CIA to reveal the CIA the UFO files, he was assassinated by an assassination directive that was put out by MJ1 Alan Dulles. No, actually, he wasn't MJ1 at that time. After Eisenhower came in, they set up a new executive order that created a new MJ12 group with Alan Dulles as MJ1, that superseded the original MJ12 group that was set up by Truman back in 1947. So, so basically, the Nazis had completely controlled this whole thing. They, in 1954, the Nazi SS set up the Bilderberg meetings, which, along with the Council of Foreign Relations Trilateral Commission, control all of the mainstream media through the 6 corporations. And so I finally, after many years of research, I spent about 20 years researching after this event, I find out that the mainstream media is essentially controlled for this agenda that is not in interest of the American people. That is why they did the limited hangout. Limited hangout means out they only let out the information that's safe. It's limited. And so that's what happened. Just recently, like last month, one of the witnesses, Mark McCandish, testified about that we've had these anti-gravity craft that were developed back in the 1950s that could go faster than the speed of light. They were called alien reproduction vehicles. In next month, in June of 2021, they're going to have the intelligence agencies are supposed to present to the Senate their intelligence report. All 18 intelligence agencies are supposed to reveal everything they know about the UFO at the Senate hearing. And the narrative has been through the mainstream media, the enemy of the people, of this alien threat. You hear it a lot. But what would destroy that narrative would be that we already have these technologies, that the like Mike Tubert, it was like in 2019, I believe, he came out and said that the Tic Tac that back in November of 2017 got saturated across all the mainstream media outlets for about 3 days. So you can imagine if it's on, CNN, BBC, New York Times, ABC, CBS, across all the networks, they made sure that even your grandmother knows about the Navy Tic Tac of the 2004 Nimitz incident. They fully wanted to saturate the public's awareness of this reality. And Luis Elizondo, who worked in the Pentagon Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program, and then they even rolled out the History Channel with the Unidentified series. I watched the whole series and nothing but the term alien threat is through the whole thing. Well, Mike Tuber, U.S. Air Force specialist who worked with the Air Force on this, he testified that the Tic Tac was actually made at Plant 42 over at Edwards Air Force Base at the Palmdale facility that Lockheed built these U.S. Air Force secret space program drones that could go 24,000 miles per hour, 500 miles per hour under the ocean. He fully testified, and there was 3 naval personnel that verified different parts of his whole story. So it was very credible. But then on April 9th or 7th, I believe, anyway, beginning of April, he all of a sudden came out publicly and said, "Oh, that story, I made it all up. I fabricated the whole story. It was just a psychological test, like that." Very highly suspicious. And less than a week later, Mark McCandish, who had the same type of testimony that would completely destroy the alien threat narrative, receives a shotgun blast to the side of his head. The police agencies ruled it a suicide, and I talked to Rick Price rather, who talked to Mark the day that happened. And Mark was not suicidal. I've known Mark. I've sat down with him. When we went to Washington, he went over, because of my technical background, we went over all the different components of the alien reproduction vehicle and how it functions. And I've been in contact very sparingly with him, over the years. He allowed me to use some images in the research I was doing, his illustrations. But he was not suicidal. And there's 5 different law enforcement intelligence agencies looking into the suicide. That tells you anything. And so what I heard was that Mark was planning on testifying at the Senate hearing next month. That testimony, along with Mike Tubers, it seems as though they were both visited and offered an offer they couldn't refuse type of thing. And Mike Tuber decided to go public and recant everything that he just said, in order not to have what happened to Mark, which apparently who didn't go along with it. That's what it appears like. So it's very sad. Mark was a really good person. He cared a lot about animals, did a lot of volunteer work rescuing animals. I remember him going to Mount Shasta, going to hearings because of the high amount of aluminum in the snow and things from all the chemtrails, and he was testifying. So he's a little bit of an activist, that way.
And during the hearings in 2001, he had the schematics. He was the one that presented the schematics and the blueprints for for the alien reproductive vehicles, correct?
Correct. His colleague Brad Sorsen went, and he invited Mark to come along, and Mark almost regretted it to his dying day that he didn't go. But his colleague went to Norton Air Force Base in 1988, and they had a exhibit for high military brass there, of kind of like an antique show. They had 3 alien reproduction vehicles. One was like a 30-foot, 50-foot, and a 120-foot, all visibly hovering off the ground, that he was able to get as much detail as possible. And so when he came back, he worked with Mark on all the incredible detail. In fact, it was so detailed that I remember Mark saying he had trying to remember the exact story, but it was like an Air Force personnel, and he saw it on the wall, and he like freaked out, because it was so accurate, basically had a Tesla coil configuration around a mercury tube with the capacitor plates underneath, that this thing would, once it was activated, it would cause a mass cancellation and allow the craft to go faster than the speed of light. But this thing was made back in the 1950s. I mean, it had like kind of aircraft ejection sheets and balls to control it and cameras that looked out. And this was like, these were the antiques of 1950s. And so, yeah, this saddens me greatly when I learned of this, because Mark was such a good person. And uh you know, these
If I
things
may,
happen.
how do we, how do we know, or if I may, and you don't have to tell me a name or anything of that nature, but how did you, what's your information that, in terms of his plan to testify during the upcoming
People who were
hearings?
close to him shared that with me.
Okay. Yeah, because
uh
it didn't make any sense to me either with all of the news coming out and the, this finally becoming more public and an open discussion about it, why he would have any reason or motivation to end his own life. If anything, it'd be more of a validation on, for him in society. And yes, if you're what you're saying, he was an activist and things of that nature. I've never, met him, or I was familiar with his story, and obviously I watched the 2001 press club meeting. Um, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Now, just not to change subject, but in a similar instance, I paid attention to Carl Wolf and his testimony. Reason being, his testimony stemmed from something that occurred in Langley. Um, and I'll let you go ahead and get into that in a little bit, from what you understand. Did you ever talk to Carl Wolf, or
I was in the hotel room with him at the Hilton before we went to the National Press Club. I was hanging out with Carl. Carl was extremely nervous. He had a regular reputable situation in his life going on, and he uh he was a lot of us were kind of nervous to go before all those cameras, of the media. And when Carl gave his testimony, I remember he ended it with, and well, for those not familiar, he was a in the Air Force and a photographic equipment specialist, and they were doing the lunar orbiter project before we went to the moon, making a mosaic of the moon. And he went into a highly compartmented secure area. It was I understand it was an NSA facility over with NASA. There were scientists from all over the world, he said. And the worker that he was working with in this compartmented area started showing these photographs. He says, by the way, we've discovered a base on the far side of the moon. And he started showing down these crystal clear pictures of domes, mushroom-shaped buildings, towers on the other side of the moon. And Carl was afraid for his life at that point because he realized they had broken compartmentalized security. And so, at the end of his testimony, he said, and here it is, 30 years ago today, and I hope to hear it on the evening news, but you never heard it on the evening news. Very strangely, Mark was on a bicycle and a huge truck ran him over and killed him.
Carl
Uh,
Wolf, you mean?
Carl
This
Wolf,
is
yeah. So, we've lost a lot of. I had lunch with Commander Graham Bethune, who's to my right. I'm only one with a kind of a summer jacket on and he flew Admiral Byrd down to Antarctica before the
Whoa.
Operation High Jump, and he passed away. Uh, uh, Clifford Stone, the 57 different species, he recently passed away. My dear friend Donna Hare over here, that worked for 20 years at NASA, where they're airbrushing the UFOs out. NASA was taken over by the Nazi SS, run by Dr. DeBus. It was, just, and actually, one of the astronauts, Clark McCleveland, actually saw Hans Kammler, who was Himmler's chief and taking care of these secret projects of this for the space program for the Nazis. So yeah,
Is Donna Harris still with us?
yeah, Donna Harrison, she had an incident that happened that she shared privately with me, but I won't, but there's just like there's not many of us that's left from 20 years ago. And my testimony is kind of minor, compared to what some of these other people like Captain Salas right here. He was 60 feet underground controlling 8 nuclear tipped ICBMs, and just come overhead and shut them down.
I am very familiar with his story. If I'm not correct, he ran for either, was it, he ran for office relatively recently, if I'm
I
not
wasn't aware
mistaken.
of that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I believe it was, yeah, either Senate or House. But yeah, I believe he ran for office somewhat recently in the last couple of years. Um, but yes, the name of the base escapes me right now. But
Maelstrom Air Force Base, and then within
Maelstrom.
minutes, it went over to Echo Flight and shut down all their ICBMs. So the guards were up topside, freaking out with their weapons drawn, and this red glowing disc was hovering over, and all the ICBMs went to no-go situation, unlaunchable. Like saying, you kids don't want to play with these.
Yeah, yeah, like kids playing with matches. Yeah, I don't agree with the type of spin that they've given that on making them seem like they're a threat, when in reality, I mean, we're only hurting ourselves in playing with nukes. I get, I don't completely understand everything, but yeah, I don't agree with the threat narrative being the only discussion that we have. I mean, if you have somebody knocking on your door, you ask who it is. No one's talking about opening up any discussions or approaching these type of events or these type of crafts or anything of that nature. That's not part of the discussion. Yeah, I mean, it does seem like seems to be a planned, how would I say it, climatization, getting people used to the idea and warming them up. But at the same time, I don't think it's completely a mistake that when releasing those videos, it was within the framework of a target.
Oh yeah,
They are
they're spinning the
essentially training
narrative toward
people.
the agenda. Absolutely, that's what people need to be aware of. There's different perspectives. One, the ETs are a threat. Well, as Dr. Greer has mentioned many times, we're having this conversation, and with advanced weaponry, if they wanted to destroy all of us, they could have a long time ago. But then again, I'm not with all the testimonies of people who have credible testimonies, that not all have had their memories implanted with false memories, that there are predatory extraterrestrials that could be using the human race as a resource. Um, but I believe the vast majority of them are benevolent or benign. But to say that there's absolutely no predatory races, I would I would say that is is a bit, presumptuous and premature. I would say there's mixed agendas going on, and one of the and there's some good benevolent extraterrestrials that are working with the U.S. Navy. that helped launch the Solar Warden program back in the 1980s. That was kind of a counter to the reptilian race that Nazi Germany was able to have that, as Professor Hermann Oberth said, who was Werner von Braun's mentor, we had help from people from other worlds. In other words, the reptilians that were down in Antarctica that were assisting him with their secret space program. So, anybody that works with the Nazi SS and have the similar ideology, can't be the most friendliest guys in the world. So it behooves everybody to, people are just in the world just trying to survive, just trying to live, and especially with all that's being perpetrated upon us right now, with the COVID situation, they don't have the time to research history. I've researched authenticated documents over the decades. I've researched so many witnesses, many with supporting documentation that collaborate with each other. And I use that as kind of my foundational base because, anybody can say anything, but in order to substantiate it, when you have people over expanses of time, documents, and it all comes together, it would be far stranger that all that is fabricated rather than what it is all, implying and indicating.
Given the current state, I don't give the idea too much energy in terms of, there being a negative party or civilization out there. But along the same lines is I wouldn't, it's a big freaking universe, certainly, larger than I can comprehend or any of us can comprehend. That's anything is possible. I mean, all of the above is possible, good, bad, what have you. But ultimately, for me, I've had positive experiences and enlightening experiences, and so for me, it's a little bit of a stretch, but along the same lines, knowing what I've seen and what I've experienced, that has opened my mind up to being, more open-minded. Maybe not 24/7 open-minded, but how would I say it? I've been encouraged to be positive, regardless of the situation and what comes down the pike, to be positive above everything else. And yes, I would not doubt it. The fact that what Hitler did accomplish and did bother. I mean, it was some out there stuff in terms of what was happening between the genetics that they were studying, the parent idea that he wanted a race of blonde-haired, blue-eyed people. That was odd to me. The craft that were supposedly being worked on, that makes sense to me in terms of why would we bring them on into the United States. I would imagine we had our own projects going. However, we're dealing with nukes, nuclear and fusion. And however, they were apparently focusing on anti-gravity. So yeah, they pulled them in, gave them their own companies, like they did Werner von Braun. And in terms of a reptilian race, I please tell me more about that and how you came to that understanding or that opinion. Can we elaborate
Sure.
on that?
Yeah, in researching the witnesses, one highly credible witness that's highly documented and supported by high-level naval command, of admirals and captains, was William Tompkins, who was working with that Navy spy program that James Forrestal set up, that was meeting with these Navy spies in San Diego at the Naval Air Station. And he was an information disseminator going out to different corporations, and we were trying to catch up. There were some of it was even alien hieroglyphics that the spies were bringing back. The spies couldn't hardly believe what they were doing. That this reptilian group was basically recruiting the Nazi SS and join them in galactic conquest of conquesting other worlds in the galaxy and enslaving them. And you have to, in 2017, the JFK files came out, which showed, which George H.W. Bush put a 25-year secrecy order on, that Adolf Hitler successfully escaped and was alive and well in Argentina when President Eisenhower went down to Bariloche, Argentina, which was Hitler's hideout. And apparently, during that time, Hitler was alive, which is interesting. Also, Heinrich Himmler, who said he would never commit suicide. They found the doppelganger that ate the cyanide cap was not Heinrich Himmler. He said he would never commit suicide. And he wanted, according to Albert Speer, who was Hitler's armaments ministry, he wanted to have an empire of slaves. And brought over on paperclip was Xavier Dorsch, which was Hitler's mastermind in building underground facilities. In 1946, they started in New Mexico in the Manzano Mountains, tunneling out. Now there's hundreds of these deep underground military bases connected by maglev trains. We have hundreds of thousands of people missing every year without a trace. You have to wonder if Himmler had his, we know that to the day right now in the corporations working with the Nazi SS down in Antarctica, when their space program down there, are still utilizing slave labor. It is a key ideological principle of the Nazi SS is slave labor. And so it could be that Xavier Dorsch brought over in the underground plant program of the US, there very well may be slave operations happening deep under the earth. Who knows? We know that they have, in 1942, the Nazis had the anti-gravity to build a base on the moon, and they have operations on Mars, as the head of the Israeli space program stated that we have joint extraterrestrial operations on Mars today.
There's definitely two stories going on, whereas there is a runaway civilization or breakaway civilization as coined by Richard Dolan. And then we have this kind of, I'd call it a fantasy narrative coming out of the news, whereas, well, we're going to go to, we're finally going to send somebody to Mars and yada, yada, yada. Right. I don't really believe that. I mean, I've looked at plenty of photos that we've taken on the surface. Whether anybody is still there, I do not know. It makes sense to me that they'd be underground. I know that we have underground facilities here. I've shared those and they've been taken down. I won't do that again, obviously, but I learned my lesson. They don't like you sharing that stuff.
Sensitive stuff.
Right, especially when it comes to an underground base or what have you. And it's out there, it's on the internet. You can search it and they advertise it as providing services. I have family in that area. I won't say which area it is, but yes, that is known as underground so-and-so. And even the testimony of Clifford Stone, he was taken in one of those type of maglev underground transports from Fort Meade to the Pentagon, to someplace underground beneath the Pentagon, and then returned, only to, I guess, have somewhat of his memory wiped, and everyone at the base kind of acted like he didn't go anywhere. So
they have that technology.
I wouldn't doubt it. So the curious thing about Mark McCandlish is that his testimony would have been in competition against the narrative that they haven't made much progress,
Absolutely.
right? Because I mean, they're trying to play this, whereas we don't, yeah, we've had this technology. I mean, you have the Washington, New York Times, Washington Post covering these stories, and coming out basically saying that we have recovered technology. We have the document for the admiral on the meeting with Dr. Greer and the admiral, um, pretty
Right, the
much stating,
transcripts from Dr. Eric Davis, who
mhm,
met with in 2002 with Admiral Wilson. Admiral Wilson was furious. He was trying to find out more, and Dr. Eric Davis apparently recorded the whole conversation, transcribed it later, which later ended up in Dr. Edgar Mitchell's files, which then became public. And in the meeting with the corporate people, which was Lockheed, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, you have all these different corporate contractors that are working, that are you know on these projects. The corporate attorneys that the admiral met with, refused him access. They said, you're not on the bigot list, which is a list of accessible, and he got rather mad. He almost he said if he didn't drop it immediately, he would lose rank and see an early retirement. So they basically threatened him. Um, they said to him, which I believe is obviously is disinformation. They said, "Oh, we've been doing it for years. We haven't," which kind of goes along with Robert Lazar. Robert Lazar has been 100% consistent on his testimony. And it's true, this is so compartmentalized that they can't share with other scientists and try to group mind together and try to figure some of this stuff out. But to say that we haven't made any progress, which is what they rolled out Dr. Eric Davis in the New York Times. And anything that comes out of the New York Times, has been greenlighted from, the group that controls the agenda. So they're trying to imply that we don't know where these come from, and we haven't made any progress. We've recovered. Dr. Eric Davis in the New York Times was briefing the Defense Intelligence Department on the recovered ET craft, and basically implying that we haven't made much progress. And so all this narrative works well for the alien threat situation. And the alien threat situation, if they do that next month, it could serve one of several different agendas. One, like Werner Vaughn's false flag event, come in, which they, yeah, I can go into that in detail. But, and they could say, oh, well, must be advanced technology. We haven't figured it out, but maybe China or Russia figured it out. And so we've got to put trillions of dollars, whatever the outcome is, it's going to want to have trillions of dollars to come into the military industrial extraterrestrial complex to to do this. So it would, they don't let a this 180-day which is coming up in June. I think it actually went past that, but June is when they're going to have to give this report. They're not going to come out with this report unless they can make it work for their agenda, is my knowing, having many years of experience, and I remember when CBS came and did a 45-minute interview with me. And I said, I just want to say this 1 10 second, I won't do this interview unless I can say we have the scientists willing to prove before an open congressional hearing, we have 0 point energy to alleviate the need for nuclear oil and coal to the energy and environmental crisis on the planet, to solve it. They promised up and down, and so they interviewed me. When it aired, the only thing I got to say was, we've reached a critical point where the truth needs to be revealed to the people. And they use the same narrative that CNN did, was we are not alone. They want to put into the public psyche that the extraterrestrial existence is real, but they don't want to put into the psyche that we have this advanced technology that could alleviate many of the problems on Earth. And you have to think about the med beds in the secret space program, alleviate any disease, reverse age. I mean, just about anything you can imagine, like Ben Rich said in 1993, anything you can imagine. We have the technology to take ET home, but it would take an act of God to ever get it out of these black projects. And he said, you know, the UFOs are the ones that we make and the ones that they make, you know. So this has been going on for some time. So it's a deception to the public to say that, you know, we haven't made much progress.
Right. Because it would go against the status quo. And really, it isn't what they're worried about. What threatens them is the change in our economy, getting off the oil, an oil-based economy.
Yeah, I think they have unlimited money. They can print as much money as they want. Money is
Good
not an
point.
issue. They've got everybody, they got the whole control of the media to move forward on their agenda. They politically got everybody in their back pocket, just about. And so this whole force moving forward against we the people, um, is something the public needs to awaken to, uh, or else be a victim of deception.
Right. And oil is not a renewable resource. We're not going, I mean, eventually we're going to have to do things differently, or, I mean, we're just going to continue to destroy the planet, which,
Exactly. We could have a beautiful paradise here on Earth. You know, we could, um, you know, the producer said, I'm sorry, the higher executives made me cut that part out, read CIA. CIA, you know, ever since Operation Mockingbird, they put their high executives in the top positions to make sure that what goes out fits the agenda, you know, or gets sanitized. So yeah, and you know, you take it even further about you know, there's the deceptions being perpetrated on the people with numerous false flags. I had to go in combat action in the Navy in Vietnam because of the false flag Gulf of Tonkin event. We revealed that the terrorist event was going to be the next one, which happened just 4 months later. Werner von Braun's test, and that was a false flag event that was orchestrated. You know, they could, the next in the row, we've already gone through the rogue nations. Next is asteroids, and then the alien threat. And you know, there's been witnesses such as Phil Snyder, who came out, who was attacked by reptilians in the Dulce base. That, you know, what,
oh,
70 people were killed. He was one of 3 survivors. And he talked about in the future they were planning on using a bioweapon that you know, against the public. And according to Dr. Michael Sal's research, there was a whistleblower that was in the British military that out of the city of London back in 2005, they had planned to release the biological weapon in China. And this was all connected, strangely enough, to the Vatican and the reptilian that are connected with that. And you have to think about the Vatican working with the Nazis and doing the passports, allow them to escape. And, you know, there's all these different interesting connections that happen that I won't go too far into. But, you know, the mainstream media, you know, are there's a deception going on that is deceiving the American people. And you know, back George H.W. Bush signed the Agenda 21, which is and the 2030 agenda back in 92, I believe, which, their plan was to cull the population dramatically. And from according to a lot of highly credible scientists and doctors, thousands of them around the world, that are all coming out in orchestration saying, sounding the alarm. I won't say certain words or your YouTube will get get deleted.
Yeah, we
But
don't want to get, yeah.
people need to research that, and there's going to be Nuremberg style trials. I'm just hoping that some type of antidote can be given, and that these technologies can be released, and that these perpetrators that have been manipulating the planet Earth for all these decades or even centuries will be brought to justice, and the world could flourish in a beautiful way with technologies working with harmony. People don't have to have so much suffering on this planet. On other planets, they have their lifespans are hundreds or thousands of years. We only I'm in my 70s. People only lived to about their mid 70s and drop off according to statistics. So there's an incredible potential for a complete transformation if these deceptions can be exposed. But the trouble is that the real truth, because they have controlled our education, controlled our media, controlled our entertainment, we have been indoctrinated from birth, from generations, so that when you try to tell the story, people, it sounds like the most bizarre science fiction story ever, and it sounds incredible. But when you look at the witnesses and the documents, and you really do your due diligence and research, you find out that, like I did, oh my God, this is real. So, but
Did you know Phil Schneider?
no, I didn't know him. I studied his testimony. He was suicided in 1996 or 97 by strangulation.
Catheter. A
Yeah,
catheter.
around
Strangled
his
with a
neck.
catheter, from what I understand.
Right. Because they didn't want what he was saying, revealing the deep underground bases, and Emery Smith. He worked at the deep underground military bases there in Kirkland Air Force Base, working alongside extraterrestrials. And it's the corporations that are running these operations. The military only acts as like a security force for them. Um,
A
and
shield?
so,
Would you say a shield?
hmm?
Would you say the military is a shield for these corporations?
Act as a security force,
Okay.
basically keep people from, basically protect them. But all these facilities are deep underground. The security is so insane, that it pretty much, is kept hidden from the surface dwellers on this planet.
I want to get back to on free energy and talk about that for just a minute, and then perhaps get into some of your personal experiences
Yeah, 10
and
years
encounters.
experience of that.
10
Yeah,
years.
10 years. Yeah, I heard that Dr. Greer was there was an inventor down in the Dominican Republic that had an energy device, and I was actually on my kind of my honeymoon engagement with my fiance in Arizona, our motorhome, a little Airstream motorhome, and in the middle of the night, I got up, and my wife now, I said, I think the professor needs my help. And she somehow flashing on Gilligan's Island or something. Um, anyway, I called Dr. Greer and Professor Loiter, and I said, because I had extensive electronics background. I worked with the Naval Electronic Engineering Center for 13 years, and was a broadcast engineer, the highest class licenses. Plus, I worked with Dr. Marcel Vogel. He was IBM's top scientist and with a laboratory, helped set up the laboratory. So I was familiar with unusual concepts, unusual process. Plus, I was from childhood, I've been working with, electronics and understanding things. So I had although I didn't have multiple PhDs like the other, there were 6 of us that were technical advisors. So we started out with C's, which Space Energy Access Systems. Then it went to the other corporation was Aero, Advanced Energy Research Organization. So anyway, I flew there with Rebecca, my wife, and Dr. Greer set up a kind of a temporary lab right down the street from Thomas Jefferson in Monticello. And I was meeting with these different scientists and vetting their technologies. And the professor and we flew down to the Dominican Republic, where this Mohawk Indian had developed this. It was a modified Newman motor kind of configuration. I studied a lot of different free energy device configurations, to prepare myself for a lot of this. And he was producing over 500 watts with less than 1 watt going in. Dr. Greer said, I don't want to see any batteries connected to this or anything. So what he did was, out in the front yard, he put some rods in the ground with capacitors, and we measured, it was about 1 watt or so. And this device was for about an hour and a half powering a 300 watt light bulb, 100 watt light bulb, a boom blaster playing Caribbean music, an oscillating fan, all together about 480 to 500 watts of power consistently. So I was going to fly back down to blueprint this whole thing out. And before we got there, the inventor said 2 CIA agents showed up at his door, told him that if this works, you're dead. And so what he had done, he had completely disassembled it. Anyway, it gets into a long, crazy story. We had Hell's Angels, had a marijuana operation up in Canada. We had a suitcase of $100,000, wanted to buy this energy device, and they threatened to kill us, and I'm sitting here alone with the inventor and Professor Loiters on the phone with Dr. Greer, down the street, and they're coming back. And I said, I've been in combat action, but, I didn't expect this. Anyway, I won't go into there was a lot of really crazy stuff going on. So I was supposed to blueprint this thing out and send it out by 5 different carriers, DHL, UPS, FedEx, so in case we get whacked on the way back, we would still be able to reproduce it. And so that's just one. You can imagine, for 10 years, I've met with, the first few years I worked with Dr. Greer and Professor Loiter, with some inventors, and worked at the University of New Hampshire with the professor who was teaching there. Out there, they had a NASA certified laboratory machine shop that we were making some of these energy devices, winding these coils and things in the professor's basement that we had set up. Anyway, worked with the Bedini brothers for many, many years, which both mysteriously died the same day. And just one horror story after another. One Dutch inventor had a box that produced about 140 watts of power. He was on the way to Europe to patent it. He was found slumped over dead in the parking lot of the airport with a heart attack. They have these heart attack weapons. After several suicides, murders, threats, most of them received national security orders, which is a secret system within the patent office, special application warning system. Anybody that's got anti-gravity, free energy, any of these type of things, they get issued automatically one of these national security orders, which states your invention has been deemed to be a detriment to the national security of the United States. Therefore, you cannot share it with anyone, and anybody you shared it with, you have to share it with us. And this is a stem from back when the Nazis took over they set up the Invention Secrecy Act of 1951. And since that time, we have, close to 6,000 at least solutions to get off of nuclear, oil, coal, anti-gravity. You completely could transform the world, but these have all been suppressed with these national security orders. So after 10 years, Ken, and seeing what happened, I just gave up. I live off the grid, but it's with just regular solar panels and nothing exotic. Just making that clear.
Laughing, but yeah, more serious. I get it. It's a shame, and yeah, it bothers me that is still a policy, an operating policy, that they will go to such lengths to, I mean, to kill a person.
Look what happened to
I'm
Mark
not
McCandless.
surprised, of course, but yes. Um, yeah,
Shotgun blast to the side of the head. Um,
yeah.
Mark
How do you
was
pull that
not
off as a
suicidal.
suicide?
Right. He was not suicidal. And just so coincidental, less than a week after Mike Tuber comes out and totally says, I made the whole story up. No, I don't know what it is. I was just doing a psychological test, and, just really a lame, a lame retraction of his testimony that was actually substantiated. What it was the Tic Tac was the US Air Force's secret space program's drone that was going up against the Navy's best radar systems to see if whether or not there was only certain people that, the Navy personnel came in and they confiscated all the records and everything like that. It was a secret operation that they were doing, but apparently Harry Reid with working with Robert Bigelow and then with Luis Elizondo, and they were able to acquire some of this, and they were able to pull the story out with the To the Stars Academy with Tom DeLonge and his connections, made front page all over the world back in November of 2017 with the Tic Tac story to completely saturate. They don't do that. They don't get green light like that unless there is an agenda behind it.
Agreed. No, I agree with you. I agree with you. And it's fascinating to me that, first of all, that they would come out with the video and change, be that open with the narrative, but in hindsight, if it's actually technology that if it's our own technology, and then they are in fact testing it on the other branches of the military, and it wouldn't surprise me. And we've been warned against a false flag operation, and whereas they would use this technology against people, against the general public, perhaps, and who would benefit from that, aside from the military, industrial, corporate, pharmaceutical complex. And we have to, I mean, that's a whole list of people that we have to include. But let's face it, I mean, I don't believe that the government's completely, they got more stuff, obviously, than what they're letting on. They have information, certainly. There's got to be some type of trail, going to these corporations that are heading this off. I personally, through my work and my job, I've had phone calls from Lockheed Martin asking if they can use a particular product to store something in the desert. Uh, that doesn't tell me anything aside from I was bold enough to ask, "What are you hiding, aliens?" I can't hear you. That was the response. I'm having a hard time hearing you. I didn't take it any
Interesting.
further than that, but I can tell you that's my own personal experience. Um, just in what I do with my profession, in my professional life. I I talk to a lot of different people from across the planet, from London to Australia to Arizona, you name it. Um, and that's just my own personal experience. Now, I want to touch base on Eisenhower a little bit. Now, you meet with Laura Eisenhower.
Mm.
his granddaughter.
Yeah, she's a good friend, and she's a wonderful lady, and I admire all the work that she's been doing. Her great grandfather had the most eventful administration with the entire extraterrestrial issue. You know, starting with the February 1954 meeting with the Nordic extraterrestrials, who were actually benevolent, want to help us with our spiritual development, but they wanted us to relinquish our nuclear weapons. There was a huge conflict going on. You know, and just before that, there was an MJ12 document how the Vatican was basically wanting to have containment of this. They didn't want the public to know about it. It was an authenticated document. And you know, the witnesses that were there, Gerald Light was one of them, who wrote that Eisenhower had planned on having a public disclosure. This was February 1954. He was planning on having on radio and television a disclosure of May that year, and that preparations were being made. But they brought a number of witnesses to witness this thing, the clergy, science, metaphysics. You know, they have different people from different backgrounds that experience to try to see psychologically how the public would react. One was from the Vatican, which was Cardinal Francis McIntyre. Everybody was sworn to secrecy, not to reveal this meeting, but he broke his security oath, immediately flew to Rome and spilled the beans with to the Pope. And I think that's probably what happened, was why Eisenhower, being a Knight of Malta himself, I've done a lot of research on secret societies, you know, the Knights of Malta, Skull and Bones, 33rd degree Freemasons. Myself, I've been in the Rosicrucian order since 1976, so I have a little bit of background on some of the ancient teachings. Basically, Knights of Malta have sort of a loyalty to the Vatican, you know, with the Pope. And so I'm speculating that probably why we didn't have disclosure back in 1954. In fact, the Nordic extraterrestrial warned us about the Zeta Reticuli grays, which a little later in that year, agreement was entered into accept abducting people in exchange for some technology. And that whole agreement, like they warned, you couldn't trust them. It didn't go correct. And then eventually that led to a meeting at Holloman Air Force Base in February 11th, 1955, with the Nazi SS that came down in one of their discs from Antarctica, which President Eisenhower boarded, and there an agreement surrender was signed. And from that point forward, Eisenhower was denied access. Kennedy was denied access. Carter had a UFO report, and he was denied access by George Bush Sr., which Daniel Sheehan, which is one of the witnesses back here, testified.
He was a constitutional attorney that allowed everyone
right
protection in order to testify, essentially.
What is
right?
interesting about Daniel Sheehan is that he was approached by, this was a recent video that just came out a few days ago by Dr. Greer, that he was approached by, because he was kind of falling out of the narrative of the alien threat with the To the Stars Academy and everything, that they're planning on pulling his security clearances. So he contacted Daniel Sheehan for legal advice on this. And he shared with Daniel Sheehan that he knows that the alien threat narrative is disinformation. And that's kind of a blockbuster right there, because they...
yeah, because he's been saying that for at least 2 or 3 years now.
And they've been rolling out Luis Elizondo all over the place on all the different networks and things, interviewing him. And so that's kind of a blockbuster statement by Dr. Greer that comes from Daniel Sheehan, who I just recently did a conference with. I love your questions. Please feel free to probe deeper on any of these questions. And I've been researching this since 1969 off and on, and then intensely for the last 20 years since I, participated in 2001. trying to figure out what happened. We should have had, this should have been a world-changing event. We should have been releasing these technologies to the world and disclosing these illegal operations. But the mainstream media is the enemy of the people, essentially. They've been infiltrated and are controlling the narrative toward an agenda that is not toward the benefit of we, the people of the United States, or the world for that matter.
Well, they're run by the same corporations that are, I mean, in all likelihood, are running these secret projects. I would not be surprised. I mean, there's no way that they're not related because the two seem to be working in tandem. And in terms of keeping the public in the dark, meanwhile, you have people offering Laura Eisenhower to go to Mars, where we have what seems to be a breakaway civilization, whereas it's the have and have nots. We on Earth are, apparently working a 9 to 5 job for the most part, largely, in the dark, paying our bills, paying our taxes, and stuck on like a gerbil, like a hamster on a wheel. Meanwhile, there seems to be other, a separate faction of our civilization that's run off with these technologies and doing what they want to do.
It was very clever of how that plan that Weltanschauung create worldview warfare, to come in, erase their footsteps with changing our history. That should be illegal. Infiltrating our media, entertainment industry, create this matrix of perception. It's I look back at this event that happened back in 2001, and it could have gone a completely different direction. Laura Eisenhower, her great grandfather, one of the witnesses was Brigadier General Stephen Lovkin, who was on his staff, and he was aware that Eisenhower was a good man, but that he had lost control to the corporations. And what the Nazis did is they completely infiltrated the corporations well, you have to think about, what happened with the Nuremberg trials of the Nazi doctors and IG Farben, and broke into a lot of the household names we know with pharmaceutical commercials that come on our television set all the time. And essentially, it's so well integrated, the 6 corporations of the mainstream media that can, it used to be about 50 corporations back in 1983, and then they consolidated it down to 6 corporations. You've got the corporations of the military industrial complex that was heavily infiltrated. And so they've got their people in their high positions that coordinate the agenda. I know it's what's mind-boggling. It's hard for people to wrap their head around is like, as they turn their TV channels and go from channel to channel or radio station, the amount of media information outlets that they control, that a lot of people notice the talking points are, if you go from one CBS, NBC, ABC, MSNBC, they all have similar talking points because it's all being centrally controlled and that narrative given. And, when WikiLeaks revealed, the Podesta emails and coordinating with Hillary on and it revealed how they're working with the different media outlets in order to fabricate a reality for the public in order to move forward on the agenda. This was revealed in the WikiLeaks documents, which of course, you didn't hear about that very much on the mainstream news, and you didn't hear much about the JFK files that showed that Hitler escaped and George H.W. Bush was involved in the Kennedy assassination, and LBJ, and and so much more was revealed in those files.
I want to cite the research that you've done, um, and and show it, reference it for people if they want to check it out.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
this is your,
it's not a professional site by any means. It means I needed to look back through time. I went back to the year 1900 to
mhm.
present day, and I started plugging in all these witness testimonies and authenticated documents. And after, I mean, it just kept getting longer and longer and longer, and everything collaborated with each other. And after you do enough research, it starts to, not to say that you have the complete picture by any means, because it's fairly highly compartmented, but the very fact that there is collaboration between these witness testimonies and these documents that substantiate a reality, that it gives you a pretty high probability of a reality that is so science fiction like that it does keep its own best secrecy, as Dr. Greer once said.
And for people watching, this is
Oh,
the
the,
webmatrix.net
yeah.
is a where you've compiled your research.
Yeah, it's and there's reference links, everything that happens along the long timeline, of,
Hmm.
I included, some wild stuff, everything, even Rasputin, in the mix. Um, just interesting things that happen along the timeline that kind of relate to each other to try to get a an overview of what has happened through the centuries, going back to the beginning of the 20th century.
Now, what this started for you in 69, and you had mentioned an experience in 1977. Um, can you go into that a little bit with a little bit more detail and set
Sure,
the
it's
stage,
something
walk
I
us
don't
through that?
usually share. It's just kind of my own personal interaction with beings. I was camping out in the mountains outside of San Diego in the Laguna Mountains with a girlfriend. We hiked way off the beaten path,
Hmm.
and I was collecting up some firewood for a little campfire. And it was at night, clear sky, amazing. You could see the stars so clear up there. Um, all of a sudden, it felt like, you ever felt like there's an intelligence or something? It felt like a coming from the sky. It felt like there was like this. I don't know how to describe it. It's almost like this
Calling.
clear, logical, uh, pure intelligence, like trying to get my attention. It was so strong that I actually reached my hand out to the sky and I said, just kind of jokingly to myself, is somebody out there? Just because I was alone, nobody's with me, right? And a star came down and started going up and down and scintillating different colors. And I'm like, I had to grab my girlfriend, so I ran over and grabbed her, and I said, "You see what I'm seeing?" And it kind of freaked her out, because she owned a metaphysical bookstore in San Diego, um, and she felt like she wasn't ready for contact. I felt there was a contact going on there with them, and it was like my first CE5 experience, I guess, before CE5 was even categorized. And it was though they were going up and down as in a yes, when I to the question. And interesting, the scintillating colors around it. Um, so yeah, she had some fear about it, and I had a feeling that if they sense any fear, that they kind of back off. They weren't
That's
interested.
been my experience as well.
Hmm?
I was just saying that's been my experience as well.
Oh,
If there's
yeah.
any there's a fear factor involved, then they'll back off. They won't, yeah, they
Yeah,
won't push it.
the other experiences I had was in the 70s. Oh, actually, they all happened that year. It was like I met this elderly lady who was having contact with space beings. And in fact, she took pictures of, and it was published in Omni magazine where you could see the craft exactly as she would draw it and illustrate. She could see it. Anyway, I went up to the mountains with her, up the property I had, and I had an experience of coming out of a clear blue sky, a laser beam coming out. And she's saying, "Oh, they've contacted you." And, it's like that whole year was a bizarre year of, I came home from work one day and I kind of I fell asleep, and I was on board this craft. And anyway, the experiences going into detail are at marcelvogel.org. I did a site in honor of his research work to him. And in the experience, it goes into detail that they put me through some type of vortex spinning and brought me up to a higher level of consciousness where I could actually see in between the pulses of reality creation. And I was able to take that consciousness and bring it back into my body and become awake. It was quite an amazing experience. And another experience that led me to work with Dr. Vogel, who was the only scientist that was working with quartz crystals he was cutting and working with water and noticing how the consciousness, the mind interfaces with it, from old folklore and everything around the planet. He had a full-on laboratory set up, electron microscopes, spectrophotometers, everything to research this. And he invited me to be a research associate. Um, what led me to that was this Kundalini opening experience of having millions of volts going through my hands and feet with this being that conveyed the geometry of consciousness. And I didn't even know, I didn't even take geometry in school or anything. I didn't even know what platonic solids were. I didn't know they fit one into the other. And it projected the sphere and it went into one geometry into the other, into infinity, and equated that with our different consciousness levels, and that we're all interconnected like that, and that through love we evolve from one frequency geometry to the next. And it put this burning desire in me to grab every book I can, which in 1977 there wasn't a whole lot of literature out there on sacred geometry. But as I started reading, I said, "Oh my God, that's it." It's like how it all interconnects. So, my other website related with that whole different subject is Marcel Vogel, VOGEL.org. And kind of goes in detail of how I ended up working with Marcel on that. Those were my 1977 is when I had major experience. In 1984, when I got out of working for about 13 years in Naval Electronic Engineering Center, I went up with my brother to see this 107-year-old Hopi Indian chief up in Oribe in the Four Corners area. And I was driving for hours, and I pulled over to the side of the road. My brother was out stretching. He pulled my car door open, yanked me on the road, and said, "Look, look, look, look." And he must have seen it when it was coming out of we were way up on top of overlooking the desert at night. And this disc went right over, must have been about 100 feet above us, about 50 feet in diameter, glowing a whitish green, more white than green, but kind of a greenish hue to it, completely silent. And then went out across the desert floor, went like that. And so, seeing it firsthand, I've seen them way up there in the sky, moving around, and they're not satellites that, go like this and then like that. They're
No.
not helicopters or anything like that, but I've never seen them that close. And so those were my main, and I've done a number of CE5 in Crestone and Shasta and Joshua Tree. with Dr. Greer, a lot of different CE5 events, and
If I may,
seen.
what, not to interrupt you, but
Oh no.
I did want to ask, what type of species or whatever you want to call them, race, species, humanoid humans, what were they like? Can you tell us?
Well, my experiences was very benevolent. Both of the experience on board a craft with a whole bunch of little beings and one large one. It was in a dream-like state, but it wasn't like a dream. I mean, it was like it was it was different. But all of them has been positive. The being with a large cranium and large loving eyes that I was viewing with my eyes closed, with the millions of volts going through my
Oh,
hands and
wow.
my feet. Um, there was incredible love coming out of its eyes. Um, and
Would you say that was a tall gray?
it was more like a short gray with a very large, but there's many different varieties of grays. Um, some are very spiritual evolved, highly evolved, and some are just little clone drones, that do specific tasks, that have no emotions or anything of that nature. I haven't interacted with any of those, but yeah, that was my there were positive experiences, kind of like teaching me something, teaching me something that consciousness says. And now, decades later, I researched, and in fact, I met with Dr. Greer and a bunch of scientists in San Francisco. When I first started with, trying to meet with these scientists to bring out an energy solution. One of the scientists was a Swiss theoretical physicist that he was showing me an energy device that was like a half dome that was powering a light bulb. And something made me want to share that experience I had with him, not knowing his background. His name was Nassim Haramein. And he said, yes, that's it. That's the structure of the matrix. That's exactly it. And so it kind of gave me, and as I researched through the decades, I find out that the entire holofractal universe, in fact, I worked on a camera that could move forwards and backwards in the time and could take a photograph of somebody, they could be on Mars or on the other side of the planet, and it would project holographically and capture it on a film emulsion that Dr. Vogel, I was working with two other scientists on this project. But anyway, that gets into a whole another thing. But it basically proved to me the holofractal nature of the universe.
And then that related somehow to sacred geometry and from the creation of our physical reality from our consciousness.
Our DNA, is basically it has a frequency. Each soul frequency that comes from our soul has an emanation. So you can take like a drop of blood, it's called radionics. They're using it from England, in fact, going back to ancient Egypt, and attune to it. Radionics is more like a tuning focus for the mind, you could say. And it would, because all points in time and space are interconnected. There's no separation. So you can resonate with that. And because it's a part, just like in voodoo, you take some hair or fingernail clippings, or you have that DNA, you have an energetic link. And so you can immediately affect that or attune into that.
Wow. Uh,
But
I
that's
had a
like a whole nother show, a whole nother
Yeah,
subject
yeah.
altogether.
Wow.
So you asked me about my ET interaction, and that's what that led me to doing research work, which I find, decades later, that the whole universe is the planets, the orbits, the whole planet has a star tetrahedral. Every planet, the sun, everything has 19.5 degree points of the star tetrahedron, the dodecahedron, the isosahedron grid, where the main points of nodal points, where the energy vortexes, where it transitions from one frequency geometry to the next. They call them like portals. In fact, the UFO report that I received in 1969 that was up by Alaska, the astrophysicist Kip Thorne says there's two natural forming wormholes above and below the Earth. One's above Alaska, the other one's below Antarctica. So, it could be that these naturally formed wormholes are used as jump gates.
So we have areas around the planet that are natural portals.
Two, yeah, one above, one below, that forms as the Earth rotates. It's not flat, it rotates.
Dan, I wanted to ask you, do you get any sense of urgency these days with after your encounters? Do you get a sense of urgency at all?
What I see in the media, what they're doing, what I've learned, what's happening right now, with this biological situation and the injections into people, I have great. That's why I'm doing this show with you. I'm feeling in this last month, I've done like nine different shows, conferences, because people are asking me, because it was May 9th, 2001, exactly 20 years ago. So they're sort of celebrating the 20th anniversary of the disclosure event that didn't disclose, other than, we're not alone, UFOs are real. That's the only thing that they allowed to go out there. They didn't want to allow anything that shows that we've have illegal infiltration, that we've had technology that can help and benefit the entire world. They didn't want that out. And so, again, the mainstream media has been infiltrated. And being an ex-ABC newsman, that's kind of like what I wasn't like a big anchorman or anything like that. I was a chief broadcast engineer for the most powerful FM station on the West Coast and did the news reports. And I had no idea when I ripped off from the teletype, of the 70s, it was ancient, UPI, AP, and was reading the script, just like the newscasters do today with the teleprompters. They don't know who presented, not unless they went to the CIA psychological warfare school, like some of them did, like Anderson Cooper and others. And some are just, useful in that they bought into it, and how better to convey something that you actually think is real than to have those people, reading the evening news to you. And the people that don't go along with it, that start to question, you start seeing them on the unemployment line. So, and, Project Veritas, I have to give big kudos for him, for calling out all the stuff that he did with CNN, showing that, yeah, they're doing propaganda and fear cells, and that, oh yeah, we're going to be pushing the pandemic, big time. And when that exhausts it out, our next thing we're going to do is going to be climate change. You're going to hear climate change constantly. And then just recently, they've the whistleblowers inside of Facebook are saying how they're censoring anybody talking about that highly sensitive topic that starts with the letter V. uh, and
Yeah.
how it's very much of a controlled narrative. They don't want the public to hear what hundreds or even thousands of credible, highly credible scientists, even the vice president of Pfizer, it's a genocidal propaganda that they're putting through the media is what they're saying.
I have a couple last questions on when it comes to free energy, what do you think it's going to take before they they start allowing these to come out? Are we going to start with a smaller version? Are we seeing any smaller versions that they've allowed to roll out? Or do you think it's going to take a environmental event before we start, waking up to, our own greed and how the system needs to change?
Well, Ken, after 10 years experience of what I, shared with you, there's no purpose for them to release it. They want to maintain geopolitical control. If third world countries have this technology, they can be brought up. They want to be able to keep everybody under their thumb.
Right.
It's not going to be released until, there is hope. When I learned that Eisenhower actually set up a secret US Marine Corps intelligence unit that would come as an institutional safeguard in the future to protect our constitutional republic, because he knew he had lost control by this infiltration by the Fourth Reich. Um, you see, there's several secret space program whistleblowers that have stated that Eisenhower did set this plan in motion. And from the year 2017 to 2019 or so, there was posts on back channel on the internet, or the 17th letter of the alphabet that we can't say or else it gets censored. And you have to wonder why it is so threatening. And basically military intelligence operations attempting to alert the public, because they had to go around their control of all their mainstream media outlets. And so that whole operation for about 3 years, and I've read through all of their posts, and it's all exactly everything I've researched and studied. Um, and and then and then you have Admiral Mike Rogers with the White Hats taking over control of the NSA. And the NSA was going to be used against us, making portfolios on everybody, on who can be reprogrammed, who needs to be eliminated, and so forth. That's a threat. But the White Hats have gained control of that. You have to think about it's over 300,000 or so sealed indictments. Look at the last administration, what they did for executive orders of people doing human rights abuse or corruption, child sex trafficking, changes to the Uniform Code of Military Justice, allowing these people to be tried in military courts. All this is set in place. So they have all the evidence of these people. So I would say the only way that the energy technologies and things that benefit the world, like Ben Rich said, it would take an act of God in order to get these things out, is that at some point, the process that we're going through right now is the deep state has, they compromise the the vote, and so they have their asset in place that's carrying out their agenda. They had like a 16-year plan to destroy the U.S. The Bilderbergs chose Hillary for the first for the second part. Obama was the first 8 years, but military intelligence recruited our last president. And so what this period we're going through right now, they're accelerating their 16-year plan. You can see like the 63 executive orders signed away, all the changes we're experiencing right now, because as the military intelligence used to say, you can't tell the people about this. They'll think you're a baseless conspiracy theorist, as they've weaponized the media against anybody speaking out. You have to show them. And so right now, we're going through the period where the public is seeing what they do when the deep state is in control of the commander-in-chief operation position. And so it's my hope, although, I don't hold my breath for anything, that at some point, we'll look at the what's going on in Arizona and Georgia and the different states. Are we looking at the irregularities that happened? And so it may be that, maybe a dominoes start falling, and all of a sudden, since they have the goods, the only way these technologies, to answer your question, the only way these technologies can get out to benefit humankind, and you're talking about not only energy, but medical, we've got a corrupt medical system
Agreed.
across the board. My great
Yeah.
grandfather was the president of the Homeopathic Medical Society, as going up against Rockefeller medicine. So I have it in my DNA that my mother was cured of cancer. The doctor said she was going to die from. I took her over the border, across the border, the Gerson therapy, nutrition. She couldn't find any cancer. She lived to be 91 years old, cancer-free, using nutritional therapy. And they wanted to cut out her eye and half her face. It were hideous. Anyway, the medical system is corrupt, as many people are finding out, and that only if this deep state cabal at the highest levels that are controlling all get brought in for Nuremberg type of trials, or down in Guantanamo Bay and military tribunals. And these people will get taken out of operation that have basically hijacked our planet technologically and spiritually. Will these technologies be released, to answer your question?
Well said. Last question. And I'll even expand upon it. What would you say, with this being recorded and this signal being sent out, what would you say to any visiting civilizations within our hemisphere, within our planet? What would you say to them if they ran across this interview and this transmission?
Well, that's an interesting question. I have no idea what would be in their minds or what their agenda would be. Or, there's, keep in mind, back in 1989, Clifford Stone said they had already categorized 57 different species. There's way more now. It was basically a book that had some are silicone based, some are carbon based, that they had to patch them up. It was like a first aid manual. And so they had categorized these different types of beings. So, originally, way back in the beginning, there was like 2, and then there was like 4 types, like Robert Dean talked about, that NATO was dealing with, because
I'm familiar with Robert Dean's work.
Yeah, you remember. You talked about the 4 beings and the manual, the standard operations manual for recovery of the extraterrestrials and handling and disposal. So there's I can't give you I don't know what type of if they come across this video, some will feel like we got to get this guy, and some will say, "All right, he's helping in the global awakening," which I'm just one voice of millions of voices out there that are becoming awake and aware. And people, like I said, people don't have time to do the due diligence and really research this deeply. It's easier just to look at the fact checkers, and since Google controls all the algorithms and everything, if you research this stuff, you'll get all the official responses. I recommend DuckDuckGo, or I recommend Dr. Michael Sala's incredible research at exopolitics.org. To try to wrap your mind around this hidden history that we all have been born and indoctrinated into, that that, we need to pay attention or we will be deceived again, as we were with previous deceptions that, the Gulf of Tonkin, 9/11, uh, the pandemic. People look at what happens at 45 cycles at the PCR test. All based on that in order to move forward on an agenda that is not in the interest of the people of this planet, but more of an interest of a cabal, termed the deep state, which involves Nazis, Chinese Communist Party, banking elite of Europe. It's like a group of similar ideologies toward uh, a common goal, and that common goal is like a new world order with disarming the population, reducing the population dramatically, and having basically an enslaved planet by the ruling elite. And that is their objective, and that's their goal.
Yeah. What would you say to the planet? I mean, we went over what you'd say to any ETs already here. What would you say to the deep state or anybody on the planet moving forward? What do you think the best course of action is for us moving forward? And you've been speaking out, using your voice. Yeah, what would be, if there was a last message, what's the
Oh,
most important message they can give us?
well, my personal perspective from research is that there's not the alien threat. We know who they are. They know where they come from. Obviously, we've had the technology for decades, so the whole alien threat narrative doesn't work. That all extraterrestrials are benevolent. I understand the reasoning behind it, not to feed a bad ET, which would feed the alien threat, false flag agenda, which could be used against the people. But it's when you don't recognize that there is a full spectrum out there, that there are some predatory races that could be operating in the underground, behind the scenes, working with the deep state, that is moving forward on their agenda, but they're not public. They're not like coming out with flying saucers and attacking us with like what happened with Admiral Byrd. That there could be a lot of very hideous activity going in under the deep underground military bases. My perspective is that there is mixed agendas. The thing that's reassuring to me is not only the white hats within our military who are sworn to protect our constitutional republic, but the fact that the Nordic extraterrestrials that are benevolent, Nordic looking extraterrestrials, and there's and you can't be racist, and say, not all reptilians are bad, not all Nordics are good, so there are certain races that do have our best interests for our spiritual. They want to see us Earth liberated and freed. They're working with the US Navy, from what I understand from credible witnesses. So their technology far exceeds that of the predatory races, like the Draco reptilians, for example. So that's reassuring to me, to know that a more benevolent race has technology that trumps, I guess, the lower technology. So right now we're at a point of will the public will be bamboozled with this upcoming June Senate hearing that spins it to a certain narrative that people have no idea, and they will go along with what they see on CNN, or will things start to be exposed, and the public? I personally, I believe that, and I know that each one of us is connected like a fractal to a larger holographic mind of a morphogenic field. and that you and I having this conversation is affecting this morphogenic field, just talking about this sort of thing. And there's millions of people talking about this sort of thing. And we may get censored on the social media channels, but there is a global awakening happening right now that's accelerating. And I believe that with that global awakening, when it reaches a certain critical mass, we're not going to be able to be fooled again. We're not going to be deceived, bamboozled, into another deception by the deep state in order to move forward for their agenda that's against the people of this planet. And that's my final thoughts, Ken.
Thank you. And thank you for coming on and joining me and sharing your thoughts and experiences.
My
Like this
pleasure.
is, yeah, something's definitely going on, and I want to share and get people's their knowledge and their experiences out there to increase the awareness on what it is that's going on. Um,
Don't follow any particular one person, do your own due diligence. I'm kind of a maverick, and I do my own research. I don't, although I love a lot of work that Dr. Michael Salla has done. He's done some amazing in-depth research, and I have great admiration for Dr. Stephen Greer and his courage. He had his life threatened not to bring this meeting forward, and all the work of bringing forth hundreds of witnesses that he's done. So,
he's had people assassinated on his team as well, and the common denominator was both Governor Schiff from New Mexico, who was trying to get things released, as well as Sherry Adamak, his assistant,
yeah,
and himself.
right.
They all
I,
suffered from some type of metastatic cancer. Am I correct?
yeah, fast acting cancer. And in fact, in 1996, Dr. Greer met with the CIA director, William Colby. And William Colby was going to testify about the Israeli Mossad infiltrating into the CIA and the child sex trafficking that was being done within the CIA. And he was going to give Dr. Greer a extraterrestrial derived 0 point energy device along with $50 million to get it out. And 1 week before he was able to do that, he was found floating face down on the Potomac River, ruled a boating accident. So it's been a long history of boating accidents, shotgun blasts that I had, fast acting cancers, heart attacks, people are normally in good health, uh, in order to
Protect the
move forward on this agenda
yeah,
without being
secrecy.
awakening the public.
All the more reason I think it is that we do CE5. If it, from my experience, most monsters have come from men. Um, I go out there. I'm not negative. I put a lasso around my fear, and that's where I've learned most of my lessons. Most important ones, is to just have an experience for myself. Um, and when people do CE5, they get the disclosure for themselves. They get a better understanding for themselves. It's not handed to them. They're not having someone tell them what to think and what to believe. They can witness it for themselves. And yeah, I just want to open that, kind of lay that bridge down for people and people like yourself, for you to share your experience, and on your own personal journey. And I'm sure that your journey's, yeah, and it not over for a long shot. But yeah, much gratitude for you for coming on today. And yeah, It's been a
I
lot of.
want to agree with you. In my research for metaphysics, it's your intention. You set up the controls for a benevolent contact. Um, that is an important element. I wholly recommend, doing CE5 work. I think it's important because there's a lot of benevolent extraterrestrial beings out there, much more so than there are, according to, I haven't run into them personally, but after researching so many witness testimonies that are credible over great expanses of time, there is reason to believe that, it's not 100% benevolent beings out there, but the vast majority, I believe, are. And maybe it's come to a time in the near future here where all this is going to be disclosed and revealed, and whatever dark elements have been inhibiting the spiritual progress of this planet can be reconciled and allow the earth to be liberated and move forward to the beautiful paradise that this earth was meant to be.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Um, at a later date, I'd love to revisit, and once, I suspect if it ends up being a mess with disclosure and whatever they decide to come out, or even backpedal, whatever direction they try to lead us in, I definitely want to come back and revisit with you and get your insight again, and get your insight, and yeah, um, go into a little bit further detail, maybe,
I love
with
going
your,
into
yeah.
further detail. Absolutely, Ken. That sounds great. Hopefully this video won't be deleted and censored, by the elements that are the gatekeepers of this information.
No, no. Well, um, I'm gonna have faith. I'm gonna have faith that people have a right to know, and yeah, whether it's this channel or on another, there's, what goes in the wash comes out in the rinse. I mean, they can do whatever they can. Yes, people have been silenced, but I mean, you got plenty of people that are wakening up and using their voice to speak out and share and let other people know what's going on and what they're truly capable of. Um, so sure. I mean, I'm not worried, I mean, let them, but there are plenty of other people that are coming out, and people like you and me bringing about this discussion. You're right. It does have an effect, and it does speak into existence other people saying, hey, they have a point, maybe even encouraging them to step up and say tell their story and their experience. Um, Go out and have their own. Hell, I don't, that's what it's really about. Have their own experience, for God's sakes, and,
Mhm.
find out for themselves. I don't care whether it's, with a Nordic or what have you. Reach out to whoever and ask that, then Jeffrey Dahmer is not a good representative of our civilization. He's not a good person. He wasn't a good person, but he's not a representative of our civilization. The deep state is not a representative of our civilization. I don't want a stranger talking to a visiting civilization, regardless of what they look like or the color of their skin, speaking for me. I want to, I mean, I want them to have a better understanding and a fair understanding of our civilization. And I think there are similar things that go on like that out there in space. I mean, I would imagine, from what I've understand, that peace is the ticket for us to, if we're going to travel out there. And I really feel that that's correct. It's not about beliefs.
Mhm.
I'm not saying beliefs here. I'm saying that's what I feel. That's what I feel, is that's the truth that resonates with me. Um, and yeah, I
But
was
we
really
have to
excited and,
awaken to
happy.
the division that the mainstream media is creating, a lot of division, race division, religious division, political division. It's like it's been weaponized, and until the people, like what you're saying, is like where we can recognize who the true enemy is. It's not each other. We're each other's brothers, and when we recognize that and come together as a peaceful planet, like what you're saying, and we no longer are weaponizing everything for war, then, like Dr. Greer's mentioned, we would then be welcomed to the galactic family of planets that have worked things out, and it's just a matter of the Great Awakening, which I believe is we're right in this incredible point in history right now, Ken.
Absolutely. There's no other time like it. I mean, it's exciting time to be alive. I didn't expect it to be, us for it to even become an open discussion, UFOs and ETs, in my lifetime. But I mean, the fact that, I came back around to it after 20 years after my own personal experience, and then for the rest of the the culture to roll out with having an open discussion, and that validates a lot of people in what we've been saying in the first place. And it, it's great that they're having people talk about it and they're bringing on pilots. But again, it comes down to the citizen. It comes down to the citizenry and what they're experiencing. Nobody's I mean, I get it. There are people with bad experiences. But along the same lines, we've done our research, we've done surveys, and a lot of those people, while it did shock them, the experience shocked them at first, they wouldn't they wouldn't have those experiences taken away from them. It did something to them that was positive. Some people have been healed, and I think that's what should be understood. Yes, it can be scary, but I mean, ultimately, people are transformed. These are highly transformative opportunities that we're looking at these days.
True.
And yeah, I just can't thank you enough. And I look forward to having this discussion again, sir. And
Mhm.
it's been my pleasure meeting with a like-minded soul.
Let's envision, we each have the creative power within us. Let's envision, the world liberated and these deceptions exposed, and a reality that is better than anyone could possibly imagine to be manifest here on this planet. Because each of us, through our power of through our creative mind power, we affect reality. And, all this, much of this was hidden, as part of the Nazi plan in 1957. They took out the powers of human consciousness to affect reality, all major universities across the planet. They didn't want us to know the power that we have. Each one of us has an incredible power to affect, the reality. And Hollywood knows this well. They use it against us all the time in creating, like dark imageries of and they use what's called predictive programming and all these different things through the subconscious minds of millions of people to create reality. So use that power. The power of truth and love is far more powerful.
I'll say I agree with you. I think that's some great advice. Yeah, fear can be dense, but yeah, it is emotions such as love and our ability to co-create with each other. And a shared illusion can become a reality just as much as the truth can. But I mean, the truth is going to set us free ultimately. We both know that, and I think everybody knows that when it comes down to it.
Well, till we meet again, my friend.
Till we meet again, and thank you. Thank you again, Dan. Much love to you, brother.
Much love.
Thank you, sir.